I by April 18th, Tuesday? I mean, February 18th.
February.
I'm telling you, I'm losing track of time. Tuesday, February 18th?
18.
Okay.
You're wishing the budget cycle.
I
Right?
know.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am. So, Anna, I just want to thank you. I know that 2 years ago, I don't think we closed the books until July. And last year, we did it mid-May, so we're trending in the right direction. This year, we're probably going to have this filed by the end of February. I think that's good progress. We definitely need to have a performance objective to get that done by December 30th next year. I will be meeting with you, Scott,
Yeah.
earlier in the year
Sure.
as the
Yep.
chair, well, probably the subcommittee
Yeah,
now.
that's exactly what should happen. Yep.
October, and we'll make sure that you
Yep.
get the information that you need
Mhm.
on a timely basis to
Yep.
make sure that we can get this done.
Yep.
I'm sure that you and your team probably worked very hard to get this done for us too, because we recognize you have a lot of clients this time of year. So we appreciate
you.
your effort.
Thank
We
you very
do.
much. I appreciate that.
And Anna, thank you. We're moving in the right direction, so I appreciate the efforts.
Okay.
So with that, do I have a motion? Karen, is this how we do it? Do I have a motion to approve the audit reports in their draft format?
I would say approve the draft for submission by the end of February, unless there's a significant change, which will be reported back to the Board of Finance.
Sounds good.
Somebody can just say so moved and second it?
Okay.
So
moved. Okay, great. And second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice
Thank you
evening.
very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of January 15th. Did everybody have a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
Any
Yes.
questions, comments, concerns?
I had just two typos. On page 3, under new business, let's see, 6th paragraph, 4th line, 11th word should be find, F-I-N-D, not fine, F-I-N-E. Just a typo. The other one that I saw.
Levying fines on the dog.
Yeah, really. Page, is it 6? Page 6. Looks like it's page 6. Yeah, page 6. The 5th bullet down, the first line, the last word should say B, B-E, and not just the letter B. I don't know if it was just a typo or just not printed or whatever.
Okay,
That's all I saw.
okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just have one, on that same, let's see, where is that? Let's see, I have it on page 5. The 3 paragraphs from the bottom, the grant that, Julie Wilson is seeking is, for a generator, not HVAC. I mean, that, and I probably misspoke when I said HVAC, but it's my error, I apologize. I didn't go back and watch the recording, but I would guess that in my own mind, sometimes I conflate the two. I mean, if we're gonna make some corrections,
Mhm.
just throw it in there. Okay.
Okay. Everybody else fine? If so, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, the regular meeting for January 15th, 2020, with the amendments.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, reports, the Board of Education. My understanding is that half the board is actually sick, and they weren't able to send a representative over to talk to us this evening, but we did have Rich Steele and Ann Chicello go to the, they were invited, we were all invited to take a tour of the elementary schools, I believe. So, Rich, would you like to just give a 2 or 3 minute overview of that?
Sure. The Board of Finance and the Board of Education were both invited to go for a tour of the schools, the high school, the middle school, and Lily B. Haynes Elementary School. And we had administrators at each building. At the high school, the principal, Mike Susi, and then at the middle school, Jason Bickgood, and at the elementary school, Melissa DiLoretto were our tour guides. And what we saw was a very high level of engagement within both the students and the faculty at each of the schools. We got to see the facilities at each of the schools. And where things were very interesting were at the middle school, seeing the Kiva format and the integration of different disciplines within each Kiva. The Kiva is breaking a large middle school down to smaller schools within the large building. And it was arranged in a very efficient manner that students could go from one subject area to another with a very defined physical space, and that things were coordinated very well. In addition, the technology that was available at the middle school was very impressive, to the point that they even had a 3D printer available within their technology group. And then we saw things such as the string orchestra and their practice. We got to see the use of I want to call them iPads or laptops versus the standalone workstations, and how that facilitated the implementation of the lesson plans. At Lily B, we got to see a range of technology implementation that what I had understood was a completion of the renovation of the schools. The punch tickets haven't been completely punched out. That in terms of bandwidth for the schools, we got to see a crash in one of the, I think it was the second or maybe it was the first grade classroom.
Mrs. Arnold's, that one?
Yeah,
That
it was one that was on the left. Yeah, as we were walking down the hallway.
First grade.
That she was doing they were learning very elementary spelling.
Yeah.
And she had a technology, I'm going to call her an advisor, but there's a person at each of the elementary schools that goes around and helps the teachers become acquainted as to how best to use the technology to advance the education of the students. And it is very impressive to see that the students can very much so be interactive with the teacher through their devices. But as I mentioned, the bandwidth in the buildings isn't quite there yet where I thought that it would be. So we did have a crash that was evident. And then where I thought that the elementary schools were completely moved over to the ProView methods from the smart boards, they aren't fully implemented yet. They're still awaiting some of that to be done. But what I saw was within all the schools, very high engagement, the use of technology to aid in the assessment and have a very dynamic assessment of students, that from the time of the lesson to recording the data on how students perform to it being put into a database that can then be analyzed, and team teaching that really helps to bring parity among the different classes in a school and among the different schools in the system. I was very impressed.
Good. Thank you, Rich. Ann, do you have anything to add? Or
I think you did a great explanation. I guess I thought it was interesting when I went to one of the kindergarten classes. They were at a computer center, and they were each using the computers, and they had headphones on, and they were learning reading. And as they were learning it, as they were doing it, it looked like a video game. I'm like, what are they doing? And they said they were doing reading lessons. And I was kind of watching, and like, some of the kids were at like level 1, and then we had like, you could see the more advanced kids, you could see it was like level 3 or 4. So which I thought was good because, you know, the children who were a little slower were at one level, but then the ones who could advance were able to advance versus having to kind of wait and not be at the same level, you know what I mean? And be bored or anything like that. So I thought that was really good. I'm trying to see what else. The children in that first grade class, they were using, I think it was Chromebooks, is that what they were? Or some kind of iPad. And it was interesting because the teacher could see everything. Each of the kids was drawing like, tracing the letters to the word cat, and then they would hit a button and submit it to the teacher who had another Chromebook and could look at all of the information and then see which child was getting it, which wasn't, and then they could actually put it up on the board so that the students could see it, and they could put it up so that the name wasn't on it, so the other students could see what their peers were doing, but not know whose name was associated with it. So I thought that was very good, and the teacher's like, well, I can tell exactly how far to go and who's getting it and who's not. I think, though, it's my understanding the Board of Ed wants, I forgot the number, I think $930,000 to have a 1-to-1 ratio where each child gets something. So I've just been thinking about it a lot, and I actually spoke to a curriculum advisor over at Old Lyme just to see what they had there and what issues that they have encountered. And what they said was the most important part, it's not necessarily giving a student, a laptop or an iPad or Chromebook. That's not the most important part. The important part is having a good curriculum integration plan so that you can use this in the classroom and the teachers know how to use it. And she was also saying that, and we saw this at some of the schools, that you need a human resource to supplement the teaching for both the teachers and the students. So it's not just the kids, but the teachers have to know how to supplement it and how to make the lessons and make it part of the curriculum. So I thought it was a very good experience. The superintendent, Jeff Newton, said that he was going to be offering another tour maybe in the spring also. So if possible, if you can take advantage of it, it would be advantageous, I think.
One other point that I'd like to add is when we were at the middle school, I believe it was at the middle school, it might have been at the elementary school, that the standardized tests are utilizing online versions.
Yeah.
That if your students are not familiar with going online to do that kind of testing, they're at a very great disadvantage. So it's important that the technology keep up with how the assessments are being done. And the other thing that at the high school, since I was on the Board of Ed way back when the turf field was approved, the turf field is being used for over 400 events a year. And it is being used throughout the evening up to about 9:30 at night. So it has been a very good investment for the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Rich. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next report from the First Selectman.
Great.
Good evening.
Good evening. Budgets, budgets, budgets. That's what we do. That's what we do in January and February. in March and April and so on and so forth. You know, when we do the budgets, I meet with each department. We do a top to bottom review of each department. We talk about goals, visions, plans. So it's not just handing the budget. And some budgets are very simple. You know that. It's just a salary and a box of paper clips. But we still go over the budget. We go over what the plans are and how we can improve things, and also what to look out for in the coming year. Talk about the end game, if you will. The governor delivered his budget a week ago. No surprises. One surprise we woke up to on January 1st was that we must now charge taxes on municipal parking lots. So the board of the Parks and Rec Department are struggling with changing their fee structure. So, you know, it's a municipal expense, a municipal fee, and then the state's going to get their 6.35% on top of that. We did work with, Department of Revenue Services and other towns and other Parks and Rec commissions and inquired whether, you know, if we didn't call it a parking fee, but we called it a beach fee, because you can park for free if you're going to the boardwalk, right? But there's no way around it. We've called it a parking fee for too long, and we're not going to play those games with the Department of Revenue Services, and they get audited 3 years from now and owe them, you know, $100,000 that we've had collected and already spent. So we will be charging 6.35% on behalf of the state.
So wait, can I ask a question?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if somebody goes to the beach and you have a beach sticker, are you saying you still have
The
to
beach
pay
sticker
to
will
park?
have the 6.35 added
And that's
on.
passed on to the consumer.
Oh,
Of course.
okay, yeah,
Of course,
okay,
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
just add on to the
It's
beach
going to be
sticker
added
now.
on. They're readjusting their rates. They do it every year. They look over their rates every year
Yeah,
anyway.
okay.
And there's some rates that have actually come down. I think the senior rate has come down. The multiple car, your second car, if you put a beach sticker on your second car in the driveway, that will
Yeah.
stay steady. Will absorb the 6.35 and that. So more to come on that. But those rates, as you know, are set by the Parks and Rec Commission solely.
But they'll fix the rates to round up to an even
They
number.
will round up. Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to have our beach attendants collecting pennies.
Right,
And all that. We'd rather figure out the pennies back in the room with
Good.
the people we pay, right? You can imagine, right? So that was a bit of a disappointment, but we got through that. I'm busy with the legislative committee at CCM. CCM is a Connecticut Council Conference, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. There's also COST, which is the Council of Small Towns. We fine-tune our legislative agenda so that we can lobby, if you will, to legislators about the needs of municipalities, both small and large. Of course, our focus is no more unfunded mandates. In fact, take them all away, and increase the pilot funding to the statutory standard that is supposed to be paid by the statute that enabled the pilot funding. Of course, that's down to about 35 or 40%. We have 5 huge properties in our town that we're entitled and should be receiving much more pilot funding. There is a plan by Kathy Austin, as she explained it yesterday, to perhaps start building that up in the coming years, and can only hope so. It's not going to happen this year. At yesterday's CCM Legislative Committee meeting, Kathy Austin did speak to us. She's a Democrat. She's a deputy leader and chair of the appropriations. She's also a former first select woman of the town of Sprague. She said, and I quote, and I found this interesting, it's common sense, I don't need to tell you this, if you've been reading the paper about, budgets, that the trajectory of the rising costs of education in the state of Connecticut and the pressures that these costs are putting onto small towns is unsustainable. The cost of education and what we can afford is unsustainable. We think we've reached a tipping point in several areas. Salem, I heard, is going up 10%. Basra or Lisbon, one of the two, 11 or 12%. And what they're doing is cutting out town services to pay for the education. Many of the small towns are doing that, moving trash pickup, removing parks and attendance and all that stuff, just wiping out town services and dumping it into education because they need to, because of the cost of special education and such. It's just what it is. You'll have your crack at it pretty soon. The good news, not good news, sad news. Our house was on fire last night on Oswegatchie Hills Road. An elderly woman living by herself, house got on fire. The good news is we have full-time firefighters on at 2 a.m. now. In the first time in the history of our town, right? So we were able to roll equipment to that house and put the fire out much quicker than we would have otherwise, which would have been calling and waking up volunteers who were spread throughout the town to drive down to pick up the truck to go. So in especially in the EMT world, emergency medical world, and in fire, response time saves lives and saves property. And while she had a fire and there was some damage, it was minimized, and could have been much worse, including lives. So good for us.
She's fine. She's fine?
She's fine, and her house will be fine.
Very good.
And that's not the first time. It's actually the second time in a week, I think. John just came in. Our new fire marshal's doing a great job. John Way, not related to Steve Way, who's a building inspector. Really weird. Maybe cousins way up. And I think second time in a week, or this month. Short month already. So yeah, that we've rolled trucks in the dead of night and wouldn't have been able to do that a year ago. So that's great news. And also ambulances are also being serving our public. So that's my comments for the night. Again, we're just focused on budgets and department meetings right now.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. Any questions for the first selectman? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the Director of Finance report.
Good evening. There were several items in your green folders. I will kind of go over the list of all of them for you. I did a write-up about the status of our health insurance fund, and I just thought it made sense to distribute it this evening, and I can talk about it at our next meeting, because it's a rather, it's rather detailed, and I did explain the type of plan we were under and gave information so that everyone would understand it, and in particular for the newer members, because we have talked about it in the past, and this way at least the new members could get up to speed. So I will plan to go over that report with you at the next meeting. The updated fund balance report. So if you just want to take a quick look at that. So from now on, I'm only going to show the portion related to 6/30/20, since now 6/30/19 is wrapped up. And so now I carried up what the audited fund, unassigned fund balance is, and then give the estimates of where I believe the revenues and expenses will be at the end of the year. And then attached to the fund balance report is a report of the revenues, and it goes over what we've received to date and what I'm estimating we'll receive beginning February 1st through June 30th for the rest of the year. And what I do is I go and I look at the previous year and see what came in during that time period. I kind of use that as a guide, and some of them I have to, because of something that I might know, I use a judgment call. But so this is this report. There's also a sheet of the top 10 taxpayers. The assessor came to me this morning, and on the original report that you received, the third item down said Gateway, but really Gateway made a change. They separated out to GDEL commercial, so that's been updated on here, and there was a slight change in the number, and the reason for that is because a portion of what was previously listed as Gateway remained with Gateway, and so this is the portion that went from Gateway to GDEL commercial. Now,
What was, Anna, what was the amount of, what's the grand list for the Costco building?
It's within the GD.
yeah, you know what, I can bring those exact numbers for next month if you'd like.
Because I think you had mentioned that the addition, it looks like the additional revenue that we're going to be receiving next year is 350,000 for Costco.
About 340, 350, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Okay,
so that's rolled up into the GDEL.
right.
So, I just did a cursory calculation about the increase in the grand list that we received, and I thought that that would bring in an additional $680,000 in tax revenues this year based on the new grand list. Does that number seem about right to you?
No, that would be,
About it,
About
let's
it.
just round, 700,000.
yeah.
So half of the new revenues that we're going to be receiving next year are going to be as a result of Costco. And half will be
That's
for other,
reasonable, right.
building renovations or new homes or no other large commercial property rolled onto the grand list as of last October 1st, right?
Not that comes to mind.
Small little ones.
Okay.
The
So-
apartments, the condos on Main Street, on Home Street. The little.
The little
all
ones.
add up. Connecticut Light and Power did a significant upgrade over the last 2 years, and that's why they've now become number one on the
Yeah.
list again.
That's
Remember they had
different,
slipped out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think they invested $3 million in the past, October to October, and I think $5 million in the prior year. They're enhancing their distribution network. So we're seeing an increase in tax revenue.
Okay.
Right. The things you don't realize that you don't see, such as a building and stuff, but a $3 million investment is.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Anna.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So then at the last meeting, there was a question because we were the amount of education cost sharing revenues that were scheduled to receive this year is reported on the state website about $66,000 less. And so that was a correct assumption that it has to do with an adjustment that the state made because of special education. So one of the handouts, it's called Timeline for LEA Excess Costs and State Agency Placement Grants. These are the grants.
Let's find it. And just give us a second to locate it. What- Timeline for
It was in the
LEA.
green folder.
It's in the green folder.
So basically, it defines the process that the Board of Education has to follow to submit because these grants have to do with special education. So it's the process, it defines the process that the Board of Education follows to submit the information to the state to get the education agency placement special ed grants. So in December of every year, they submit their first estimated cost report, and then in January, they actually, at the end of February, we receive that special ed funding from the state. And then in March, we have to do a second estimated cost. And that's what we estimate we're going to spend through the end of the year. And then it's kind of finalized in September of the following school year. So if our estimates are too high and they end up paying us too much money, they decrease it when they do the audit, which is in December, they decrease it in the subsequent year. Whereas if they didn't pay us enough, they would
Right.
increase it.
Right.
So
So
it's
the adjustments for the
it's kind of
prior
like
year.
this ongoing process. And so I just thought that having it spelled out would be helpful, helping understand it.
Yeah,
Because
very.
it can be challenging. Okay, so then there's an amended agenda in there for the February 20th meeting that you have at the library. And then the Board of Finance action items list has been updated, and then the HR resume that you requested. So those are the items that were in your green folder. And the January monthly reports were included in your packets, as well as the, the monthly highlight. So if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Not I, because as you know, I did not receive my packet until last night. So I think I'm gonna have to take a little walk over to the Flanders Post Office,
yes.
to see what
Well,
the
yes,
delay
same.
is. Maybe we should all go.
Yeah.
So, Anna,
Um,
I,
Hmm? I know, yep.
It was postmarked Thursday, yes, right.
Oh, I
Yes.
didn't,
Yeah,
I
they
didn't
were-
check the
I
postmark.
got
I just
mine
know I
yesterday.
didn't get it until
They didn't come in
yesterday.
until
Yeah,
yesterday.
likewise.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Talked to my
Right, yeah, that's, it's
So that
crazy.
doesn't, obviously give us a lot of time to digest the data before, turn it around in 24 hours.
No.
With that, I have no questions this evening. I don't know if anybody else, a couple of people picked it up early, which was very smart.
Usually do.
or just lucky.
Yes.
On the general fund budget summary,
Mm-hmm.
you have two columns that are both dated 1/31/2019 and 1/31/2019.
Where, the budget summary, is this one.
So I would presume one is,
Oh, 20, you're right. I
20,
see what
yeah.
you,
Right,
yep.
Likewise.
The one on the right is the current year.
oh, okay. Thank you. I assumed that, but I just thought I would ask.
I mean, if, looking at the report, I can just go over, we did receive our first installment of the ECS grant in January. We received the tuition payment is actually 2 months for Salem. We had another, I think, 70, close to 75,000. That's another good month for building permits. We received the ambulance subsidy for the firefighters for the first quarter. And then taxes, we received, $15.9 million during the month, just to name a few. In January, we also have, we make interest payments on some of our outstanding debt obligations. And then we paid premiums for our health insurance with the state. And then, just the regular police dispatch, Niantic Fire overtime. We did have some storm overtime in January, about $13,000. The one budget department that I expect us to be coming for additional funding is the dispatchers. The overtime, they're just really struggling with the overtime in that department. I believe when the chief was here last month, he did mention that he had 2 dispatchers that were out for several weeks on medical leave, and that just really put a strain on the overtime.
Anna, just,
The building
go ahead.
permits, you said it's a good month. Is that just general small, a lot of them, or is it any big projects that have boosted it?
I mean, I think there had to be, a couple of the days I saw there were larger numbers, so something of a larger scope would have had to come in for that. I didn't have a chance to actually specifically question the building
I'm just
official.
trying to look for a pattern, is it, if it's everybody building decks and swimming pools, or is it? I'm just looking for patterns.
And then Anna is still a rookie here. For the police overtime, is that pretty typical for the month? Or is that higher or lower?
I think that's a little higher than
Yeah.
normal. It's
Well,
not quite that high typically.
It
Somewhere.
looked like you were in check for the year, though.
Pardon?
On this report, it looked like you were in check for the year.
Yeah, for the year, they're doing, I have to say, I think the chief is managing it very well. They're a little higher than, I think they're at 65%, which, in a perfect world, they'd be at 60. But
Right.
he's been pretty on target up until this point.
Thanks.
Anna, just a quick question on that, the ECS grant, I think we've spoken a couple of meetings ago about that little differential between what the state says it's going to give us and then what we actually budgeted, because we actually kind of under budgeted, and we're about, it's like about 492,000.
In that, yes.
Difference. So I think we, and Camille also had this same question, so where is that going when it does come in? Are we gonna direct that to health insurance costs of the past?
Well, if we, in order to do that, we would have to go through the appropriations process with the boards. However, I think it's not quite as straightforward anymore, because we're looking at a rather substantial shortfall in the outside tuitions. If you look at the fund balance report and look at the tuition account, I think it's the estimate, it's over 300,000. So it's almost going to it's going to be close to washing out the benefit of the additional ECS revenue in the budget.
And is that Salem tuition because they're moving here? Is that folks there?
They did have, I believe they had 2 students that actually moved from Salem to East Lyme, so we lost the benefit of that tuition. But another piece of it is more Salem students went to other schools, like the Lead Magnet School, the VOAG School, more than we anticipated. So that kind of contributed to that. However, I will say that the tuition seems